Atbara to Khartoum, but I wanted to cross the Atbara Desert to Kassala and Gedaref, and then into Ethiopia. The map showed about 300 miles of open desert with a dotted line to indicate a track, but everyone I'd asked talked about a road. Yes, they said, the road is Kwais, meaning good. Could there really be a road? It was Saturday, the banks were closed, but I wanted to get on. I had 3 gallons of petrol in my tank, good normally for 180 miles. My 5-gallon jerry was only half full, but somehow I persuaded myself that I had enough. I'd only managed to scrape together a bit of Sudanese money for the hotel and bits and pieces. I knew I should take water, and I had a large water bottle, but I didn't think that was enough. So I went to the bazaar and I found a plastic cube that held 5 litres and strapped that on the back. Then I thought, well, if I get a garage to fill my bottle with distilled water, I could either drink it or use it for the battery. I was eager to start, so on Sunday morning I headed for the desert, but I couldn't find it. Ridiculous. How can you not find a desert? Wrinkled black fingers kept pointing, yes, Kwais, this way, Kwais, this road, Kwais. But the road just ended in a mountain of garbage patrolled by huge scavenging birds. Finally, I wound my way through some trees, and suddenly, there it was, this vast open space. No road at all, not even a track, just this one umbrella tree. I was so overawed that I didn't even notice those people under the tree until I looked at the film 3 years later. Well, I launched out full of trepidation, hoping for some sign of where to go, and then I saw, just visible on the horizon to my right, a line of trees. I knew a river ran through the desert to Kassala, so that must be it. If I kept the trees in sight, I wouldn't get lost. The ground was quite firm, but there were deep vehicle tracks crossing my path, and sometimes several of them intersected and I was thrown off. I had no practice at this kind of thing, and I had to keep my speed right down for safety. After a couple of hours of dogged progress, I came too close to the tree line where the sand was softer, and soon I was in it up to my axles. I was surprised to see some shrubs growing behind a rudimentary wire fence, and I pulled them up to pack under my tires so that I could drag myself out. It was hot and thirsty work, and that was when I noticed that the plastic cube had punctured and emptied itself. So I put the water bottle to my lips and discovered that the garage had filled it with battery acid. The news got worse. I looked in my tank and saw that I'd used almost all the petrol. No way could I get to Kassala with what I had left. In other words, I'd made a complete ass of myself. I hadn't even seen a single sign of life, and I wondered if they would ever find my bleached bones on the desert floor. Well, what else could I do but soldier on? I struggled back onto firmer ground, and then, quite unexpectedly, where I thought there was nothing, I saw children, and animals, and huts, and then a school, quite a big one. 300 kids, 7 teachers, not counting the headmaster. They were as astonished to see me as I was to see them. That began one of the most luminous episodes of the entire journey. It was fabulous. They couldn't do enough for me. So kind, so interested, and so generous. They insisted that I stay. Only the headmaster and one of the teachers, Saeed, spoke English, but they were all really enthusiastic. The headmaster's wife, whom I actually never saw, prepared special dishes for me. The feeling of warmth and kindness I got from them was overwhelming. Of course, we had to take lots of pictures. It's interesting to see what a skinny specimen I already was. In fact, by the end of the journey, I was down to 120 pounds, but very fit. The school was quite close to the river, and they showed me how they grew food in paddies. They pumped the water up with an ancient Ruston pump from Lincolnshire, but there was an even older device with wheels, cogs and buckets driven by a donkey that raised water 40 feet into the paddies. In the evening, when the air cooled, the scene by the river was really a version of paradise. And one night under the stars, and what brilliant stars they were, all the children came out into the desert, and I gave them a little talk about my journey, translated by Said. They asked me important questions like, do you always wear those boots? And where do you keep your money? And do you write home to your mother? The teachers also played music and sang for me. Here's some rather unusual flute music. And then one of them chanted what I believe are verses from the Quran. They kept me for 3 days, but I couldn't obviously stay forever, and I was wondering where I could get more petrol. In the end, I had to face the humiliating truth that I would have to go back to Atbara to get it. I caught a primitive bus in the middle of the night, and that turned out to be an adventure in its own right. But finally I got back with my jerry can full and was ready to continue my journey to Kassala. I was introduced to a government official who was going there in a Land Rover, and he suggested that I should follow him. But he set off at such a pace that I couldn't keep up, and quite soon I fell. They came back to find me, and here they are. The official is in the yellow shirt, and his name is Mokhieddin, a really nice man. I asked him what he did, and he said he was the forest ranger. In fact, he was trying to reforest the desert, a daunting task, and I think the shrubs I pulled up were painstakingly planted by him. The driver was full of wonder at my performance. He thought that only men with big shoulders could ride motorcycles. I said I had actually started with big shoulders, but I'd fallen on them so often that I'd worn them down. Anyway, they said if I kept going in the same direction, I'd come to a tea house where I could rest. He called it Kor El Fil, which means crocodile's mouth. I was beginning to get a sense of the life in the desert now. Obviously it wasn't as empty as I'd imagined, and knowing there was somewhere to go made me more comfortable. I moved on slowly, getting the hang of it, and didn't fall again, and I rolled up at the tea house in the early afternoon and had tea with some fuzzy wuzzies. I guessed they must be descendants of the original fuzzy wuzzies who fought against Gordon in Khartoum a century ago. We got on very well. I've still got the handmade comb that one of them had in his hair. He sold it to me for $1. It was very peaceful. In spite of all my blunders, I felt a great sense of confidence and inner tranquility. It had begun to dawn on me that luck or fortune or whatever you want to call it was on my side. Looking back now, I can see that I was already quite transformed by my experiences. For all its strangeness, I could really fit into this world, and conversing with the people was so easy. Without judgment or expectations, everything felt as light and as lucid as the tea in my hand. I don't suppose we were saying very much, but it felt as though we were communicating a great deal. I was treated with respect, and it was easy to return the favor. 2 men looking splendid in their tribal robes stood nearby. One of them held an imposing spade-shaped sword, and the other carried a self-made musical instrument. I asked him to play something, and I got out my recorder. It took him a little while to tune up, but then he started to strum a rhythm, and we all clapped along. While we were enjoying ourselves, a blue truck pulled up some distance away and people climbed out onto the sand. Obviously they were tribal people, some in white robes, but others in very dark cloaks. And with a bit of a shock, I realized that they were women. A shock because I hadn't seen any women at all for quite a long time. My new friends around the tea house told me that these were a nomadic tribe called the Rashaid. So I wandered over and exchanged greetings, you know, salam, salamat, and so on. The women wore some kind of silvery mask over their heads and turned away from me, but the men were interested to meet me. When I said I was going to Kassala on the bike, one of them said, "Oh, you won't be able to go because of the sand. You must put the bike in the truck." Having just begun to master the sand, I was reluctant to give up so soon, but in the end I agreed. They didn't seem to mind me taking pictures, although the women pulled their masks down over their faces. So then I rode the bike over and we loaded it on, and I got in the back with them. We were all crowded rather closely together in the truck. The women were very concerned with hiding their faces, and especially their lips, but their cloaks hung loose, only barely covering their bodies, and I realized, to my delight, I must admit, that they were practically naked underneath. So all this delicious jiggling of breasts around me was quite exciting. Not far along came the soft sand they were warning me about. At one point they had to put down metal tracks to drive over it. I don't know what I would have done on my own. We went on a little way, and then it got dark and the truck stopped. We all got out, and everybody dropped to the ground to sleep. Oh no, not immediately. First there were prayers. They were all very devout. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, and so on. And then we went to sleep. I was very grateful for the sheepskin jacket. It gets cold in the desert at night. In the morning, we just drove on until we came to a tent pitched in the sand, and I got my first glimpse of the fairy tale mountains behind Kassala, round and smooth like mounds of ice cream. The women and the children got out, and I photographed them, but unfortunately I was shooting into the sun. It was only many years later, thanks to Photoshop, that I was able to see what they actually looked like. Well, we drove a bit further in, and then everybody got out. I took some more pictures. They were all very happy about that, and I was really quite sad to be leaving them. It didn't take long to ride into Kassala from there. I got a bed in the Hotel Africa in a room for 6, but I slipped out on the balcony. The tea-boy had suppurating sores on his foot, so I gave him some antibiotic pills I was carrying, and through the mediation of an Egyptian chemistry teacher, I made him promise to take them all, and I got free tea in exchange. Well, the next day I ran into Mohiuddin, and he was pleased to see that I got there all right. His driver said, "You're a real man." My heart swelled with pride, but I felt a little foolish too. I don't think I told him about the truck. From Kassala to Gadaref, the track ran alongside a railway line. It was corrugated mud, and it got progressively worse until it became horrific to ride over. I'd never met anything like it. I was shaken to pieces. I tried going very slowly, but that was impossible. And in the end I realized that the only way was to fly over the top. It seemed very dangerous, and it took a lot of courage, but it certainly went faster. I had to stop halfway when it got dark, and I remember while I was sleeping on the ground, a herd of camels actually walked over me. Mercifully, they avoided stepping on me. They must have known I was there. It was a very extraordinary thing to wake up in the night and see those huge bodies moving above me. In the morning, I got to Gadaref and found a tea house. Everybody was tremendously polite. I had tea and a bit of fish, and while I was eating, a bunch of men gathered round the bike, gazing into the speedometer as though it were the soul of the machine. How fast it